solved. David arrived at the Peter Hotel late one evening, the sky a deep indigo dotted with faint stars. The air was crisp, carrying a hint of the approaching winter. He felt a shiver, not just from the cold, but from an inexplicable sense of foreboding that seemed to hang in the air, like a dark omen. The once grand lobby was dimly lit, its former glory now a mere shadow. The chandeliers, though still majestic, were coated in a layer of dust, their crystals barely catching the light. The faded wallpaper peeled at the edges, revealing patches of discolored plaster beneath, as if the walls themselves were decaying. The air was thick with the scent of dust and decay, a musty odor that seemed to cling to everything. It was as if the hotel itself was slowly crumbling from within, its very essence deteriorating with each passing day, whispering secrets of its haunted past. The few staff members he encountered moved with a strange weariness, their eyes filled with a mixture of resignation and fear. They seemed to avoid his gaze, their expressions haunted, as if they carried the weight of countless untold stories, each more terrifying than the last. As he signed the guest register, a shiver ran down his spine. The pen felt oddly heavy, its cold metal surface sending a chill through his fingers. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was signing more than just his name, but perhaps his very soul. The pen felt strangely cold in his hand, and the air around him seemed to grow heavy. It was as if the very act of signing had sealed his fate, binding him to the hotel's eerie presence, a presence that seemed to watch his every move. He shook off the feeling, attributing it to the late hour and his own overactive imagination. Yet, a part of him couldn't help but wonder if there was something more to it, something lurking just beneath the surface, waiting to reveal itself. The bellhop, a frail man with haunted eyes, led him through the labyrinthine corridors to his room. The man's steps were slow and deliberate, as if each step took a great effort. His eyes darted nervously as if expecting something to jump out from the shadows, something sinister. The journey was eerily silent, save for the echo of their footsteps on the worn carpet. The walls seemed to close in on them, the dim lighting casting long, eerie shadows that danced with each flicker of the bulbs, as if the darkness itself was alive. The air grew colder with each step, sending a prickle of unease across David's skin. It was as if the very walls were exhaling a chill, breathing out the memories of countless guests who had walked these halls before him, their whispers echoing in the silence. As they reached his room, the bellhop paused, his hand trembling slightly as he handed David the key. The key was old and heavy, its metal cooled to the touch, and it seemed to carry with it a weight of its own, a weight of dread. "Anything you need, sir, anything at all," he mumbled, his voice barely a whisper. "Just be careful." The words hung in the air, a final, chilling warning that sent a shiver down David's spine as he stepped into his room, feeling the oppressive weight of the hotel's dark history closing in around him. David dismissed the bellhop's warning as the ramblings of a superstitious old man. He was a journalist, a man of logic and reason. He didn't believe in ghosts or the supernatural. How foolish he would soon realize he was. As darkness enveloped the city, David settled into his room, the weight of the hotel's oppressive atmosphere pressing down on him. It felt like a tomb. A sense of unease settled over him. The silence was broken only by the creaking of the old building and the distant wail of a siren. He tried to focus on his work, but the words swam before his eyes. He was on edge, his senses heightened, every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of curtains sending a jolt of fear through him. Sleep was impossible. Then, the noises began, soft footsteps outside his door slowly pacing back and forth, the distinct sound of a door opening and closing. David's heart pounded in his chest, each beat echoing like a drum in the suffocating silence. Driven by a potent mix of fear and journalistic curiosity, David plunged into his investigation. He interrogated the staff, extracting chilling fragments of the hotel's sinister past. Each tale was more horrifying than the last, painting a nightmarish picture of the hotel's history. He uncovered stories of suicides and brutal murders, of guests driven to the brink of madness within the hotel's cursed walls. He discovered that his room was on a floor notorious for its relentless paranormal activity, a floor where a particularly gruesome murder-suicide had occurred decades earlier. The victims? A young couple, deeply in love but ensnared in a web of deceit and betrayal. The man, consumed by a murderous jealousy, had taken his lover's life before ending his own. Their tormented spirits, it was said, remained imprisoned within the hotel, their tragic love story twisted into a macabre dance of death and despair. Section 5. The entity reveals itself. A ghostly encounter. One night, as David sat in his room reviewing his notes, the temperature plummeted. He had been investigating the paranormal activities in the old hotel for weeks, but nothing had prepared him for the terror that was about to unfold. The room, once warm and inviting, now felt like a freezer, and David could see his breath forming small clouds in the air. The air grew thick with the stench of decay, and a suffocating dread washed over him. It was as if the walls themselves were closing in, squeezing the life out of him with an invisible force. David's heart pounded in his chest, each beat echoing in the eerie silence of the room. He felt a sinister presence in the room, a cold, unseen entity watching his every move. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up, and a shiver ran down his spine. He knew he was not alone, but he couldn't see who or what was there with him. Suddenly the door swung open with a deafening bang, slamming against the wall. The force of the impact sent a shockwave through the room, and David jumped in his seat, his notes scattering across the floor. David spun around, his heart racing. He could hardly believe his eyes. The door, which had been firmly closed just moments ago, now stood wide open, revealing the dark, empty hallway beyond. There, standing in the doorway, was a shadowy figure. It was tall and menacing, its form barely discernible in the dim light. David's breath caught in his throat as he tried to make sense of the horrifying sight before him. It was the silhouette of a woman, her long dark hair cascading down her back, obscuring her face. She stood motionless, her presence both haunting and mesmerizing. David felt an overwhelming sense of sorrow and malevolence emanating from her, as if she carried the weight of centuries of pain and anger. He could feel her eyes, cold and filled with an ancient sorrow, piercing through him. It was as if she could see into the depths of his soul, uncovering his deepest fears and regrets. David wanted to look away, but he was paralyzed by her gaze. He stumbled back, knocking over his chair in his haste to get away. The sound of the chair hitting the floor echoed through the room, breaking the silence. David's mind raced as he tried to comprehend the terrifying reality of the situation. As quickly as it had appeared, the figure vanished. One moment she was there and the next she was gone, leaving only the cold, empty doorway behind. David was left in stunned silence, his mind reeling from the encounter. David was left trembling on the floor, his breath caught in his throat. He had never experienced anything like this before, and the reality of the supernatural encounter was sinking in. His skepticism was shattered, replaced by a newfound belief in the unknown. He was no longer a skeptic. The evidence was undeniable, and the fear he felt was all too real. David knew that his life would never be the same after this night. He had seen the truth. The ghostly encounter had opened his eyes to a world beyond the physical, a world where the past and present intertwined in the most haunting and terrifying of ways. Section 6. Escaping the Nightmare, a Hasty Departure. Shaken to his core, David knew he couldn't endure another night in the cursed hotel. With trembling hands he hastily packed his belongings, his mind tormented by the ghastly image of the woman in the doorway. The oppressive atmosphere seemed to close in on him, suffocating his every breath. He bolted down the deserted hallway, his footsteps echoing ominously in the eerie silence. The once grand hotel now felt like a sinister prison, its shadows creeping closer, threatening to engulf him. He felt the piercing gaze of unseen eyes, cold and unforgiving. Desperately, he fumbled with the elevator button, his heart pounding like a drum in his chest. The elevator doors seemed to take an eternity to open, each second stretching into a nightmare. He threw himself inside, frantically pressing the button for the lobby as if his life depended on it. As the elevator descended, a chilling sensation crept over him, the feeling of being pursued, something malevolent trying to prevent his escape. Section 7. The Aftermath, a reputation cemented. David fled the Peter Hotel that night, never to return. He left behind his research, his belongings, even his skepticism. The experience had shaken him to his core, leaving him with an unshakable belief in the unseen world. He tried to forget, to bury the memories of that night, but they haunted him, whispering in his nightmares, reminding him of the horrors that lurked beneath the surface of the ordinary. His story spread, adding fuel to the fire of the hotel's notoriety. The Peter Hotel became infamous, a place whispered about in hushed tones, a chilling reminder that some places hold on to their secrets, their darkness refusing to let go. Section 8. Echoes of the Past. The haunting continues. In the years that followed, the Peter Hotel stood as a chilling monument to its own cursed history. Guests, lured by morbid curiosity, reported spine-chilling occurrences, eerie whispers, bone-chilling cold spots, and fleeting glimpses of sinister shadowy figures. The tales grew darker, each one adding to the hotel's terrifying legend. Some laughed them off as mere pranks, or the figments of overactive imaginations, but others felt the chilling truth. The Peter Hotel was a place where the veil between the living and the dead was perilously thin, where the echoes of past tragedies hung like a dark cloud in the air. Section 9. The Peter Hotel, forever haunted. The Peter Hotel stands to this day, a decaying monument to a bygone era shrouded in an aura of dread. Its windows are dark, its doors sealed shut, whispering secrets of terror through the years. It is a place where the past refuses to stay buried, where the restless spirits of the departed walk among the living, seeking vengeance. The Peter Hotel, forever haunted, forever feared.